this is what is legally is what y'all are looking for.
Mr. Miller, I'm not asking for proof that you paid to apply for a
It's
permit.
gonna be written on here, just like I just read from the department.
So I
up there.
need one from January.
That's what I'm looking
2020.
for.
Okay.
Here you go. 19. I got one for every year. Every.
This is for 2019. I need one for 2024. This is the year 2019.
You said 19.
I said January 2024.
That's what
That's the year we're talking about.
I didn't haul or pump. No, I think 24. That's
So
what-
you've seen those videos that we had today? The one actually from
But what now?
2024 showing where the sewage trail was left and the lime trail was left, that was dated in the year 2024.
Yeah, but, that has nothing to do with 24 and me pumping out tanks. I didn't pump none out in
So do
23.
you or do you not have a permit that's valid for the year 2024? Not a payment, not proof of payment. I know that you have to pay to apply, but I need an actual.
I didn't
permit.
apply for one because I didn't pump none in 24.
Did you apply, spread, or dump?
No.
No. So those videos are wrong then. Is that what you're saying?
What video? Only thing I seen was a pump truck up there at one place.
There's some videos that we played today where the dates were recited.
I
and-
said a while ago, the only thing that I pumped was one of my tanks that I had, but that tank was been full for over a year. And in other words, that permit was bought a year or 2 years prior.
But was it active?
And sure, it was active because I drove it. Well, I had a permit from point A to point B, the land where it was going to spread it at.
So the video where you're spreading, so I'm gonna move on from that. The video where you're spreading and you're just stationary. Tell me about that. Did you have a permit during that video?
That, the permit for that sewage had been on that ground for about 2 years in a concrete tank waiting to be spread because of the ground being too wet.
I'm glad you brought that up. So you testified since you've been up here, that you talked about you had a tow truck come pull you out, I think about 5 times. So if you know the ground's too wet and
You don't know until you drive out there and you pump truck to get to that 1 acre, that one field that's got that 1 acre in it. The field on the left-hand side of that road, there's 12 acres of woods there. I gotta pass that 12 acres. And then, the road that's got the water in it, that's my road. I have to drive down that road all the way in on the left-hand side is mine. That little old spot there close to the end that he's talking about is the part that I sold a few years ago to Gary. Of course, he's dead now, but anyway, that road that you see is a way that I get to that 1 acre and that one field that's green that you had a picture of it up right here. There's another 10 acres of ground there. So we got 12 there on the left. I'm still driving down the road. And then it makes a sharp left turn, and then all that land on the right is mine. And it goes all the way to Jordan Springs Road. And when I go around that curve, and I've got to go with this, where I showed you the, layout of the ground with all the marks that the soil scientists made right there.
And
See the check marks right
I
there?
do.
Okay, that is the only spot, that 1 acre
Mhm.
is the only spot that I can spread. In other words, all of this is the road. You can't see, but everything on this side of the road, all the way up this way on the right, them are woods. And then I make a turn right here. This is a ditch. And I have to go on the upper side of that ditch right here, on, just a road, no gravel, no nothing on it. It's an unusual field. I have to go from there all the way up here and then cross up here at this point, right up here is the highest point, and it tells it right down here, the elevation of everything from this ground. And this down here is the lowest point, this up here is the highest point. And there's no way water can run, and he lives back up the hill over.
Okay, that's not the question I have.
No, but I'm trying to explain it where you get a full idea of what it is.
I heard your testimony here.
Okay,
I see what you're saying.
okay. Do you understand about the truck, and spreading on here?
I understand that you're not spreading, but I understand you're dumping in piles.
No, not dumping it in a pile. 400 or 500 pounds of weight is not piles.
So when the videos show the sewage and in your words, /lime trail on the road
It's not sewage.
easement part, well, I said lime, it's mixed in, it was mixed in with the sewage.
I washed it, okay.
Okay, why is that trail there though? Is there something wrong with your valve?
Nothing wrong with that truck. Nothing's wrong with that truck because, what you see out of there, I wash it out with a water hose, the back of it. And when I wash it out, I blow it out. And then I leave that valve open. Because when I go out, I'm going up a grade. And when I go up a grade, what water is in there is what you've seen is lime mixed with water. You won't see no sewage in it. It's gonna be gray. That's all you're gonna see. And that's how I come down at the highway. When at the back of my truck, if you look at that, it's done been removed. But if you'll look at that asphalt, it's just water, just wet, wasn't no sewage. You could even see white limestone rock that come from the driveway where the back of my truck was while I'm waiting for traffic to get out of the way where I can turn and go up the highway. There is no sewage anywhere on that ground.
All right, thank you, Mr. Miller. You may step down and have a seat.
Let me see this one second. You can take the rest of your paper.
Miller, do you have any other witnesses?
No witnesses.
Do you have any rebuttal proof that you wish to put on? Then we'll move at this point to closing arguments. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard all the proof that you're going to hear. So the parties will have an opportunity to address you in closing argument. State will go first. And if you wish to hear from Mr. Miller, if he wishes to make an argument, can do so. Pull that back a little bit this way. There you go. That's fine.
Ladies and gentlemen, today you've heard a lot of talk about permits, a lot of talk about land, full sign. But really, the issue is quite simple. January 1924, Mr. Miller had his sewer doctor visit. During that month, we've got videos, he had been dumping, in his field, and he did not have a site. Word from the department, the environmental department testified to that he did not illegally process license permitted. Paying for a permit does not mean that you have one. There is an application fee for most things in this world. That does not guarantee that you have an actual permit. Mr. Miller was unable to produce a permit for us today. And he's been doing this so long and actually is continuing to pump and dump without a permit to this day, as you'll see in the proof, the letter of the charge that was just taken out. It's not a mistake. It's not a misunderstanding. It's just quite simply, it's not my to do so. And I understand people need to make a living, and they can do something so long, it's not that big of a deal, but it is a. It's telling you that there is no sewage on the road, that the white stuff is fine. Well, if there's no sewage, why in that trail on has feminine products? There is no waste there. That is a clear lack of just disregard for what's coming out of this truck. He testified that he got stuck multiple times. Mr. Larson from the environmental department testified that you cannot dump when the ground is too wet. But you see the ruts in the road. He said, I gotta drive all through this, all through that one, get up there, 12 acres here or whatever. As you're on the way, you're making ruts. I would think that a person who has been doing this long enough would be able to tell before you get to the site whether the ground is going to be too wet or not. Also, common sense, what is the weather? I know that loads need to be unloaded, but the thing is, it has to be done within the regulations because the consequences can be great. And if we don't regulate one, there's going to be a trickle down effect. People will not quite simple. Did not have a permit in January. Was pumping on wetland that had not been inspected. There has been no proof shown to us of when it was inspected except for 2008. It is now 2025. 2024 charges. 16 years. Inspections must take place, I believe Mr. Worth said, every year, the lane and truck at the same time. Every year to get a permit. There's been no proof. Making an effort to get it done. Can't say, well, I called and they didn't come out, so I'm gonna go pump and dump anyway. It's not how it works. Got the pictures and the videos. Proof on the letters. Quite simply, it's just too much. So,
Miller, you have the right to make a final statement to the jury, but again, it will not be testimony. It will just be if you wish to say anything else other than what you
Say something.
all right.
Like I said, I didn't pump nothing in 24. And I didn't pump none in 23, I think. No, I'm sorry, 24, because that's when, I tried to get it, the 23. And I did send the money in, but the two, inspectors that was new since Parksville closed that down, they started taking over. And they never did go out and inspect my thing. So I just mailed the money in. But I still never pumped anything after I sent the money in. The only thing that I pumped was what was in my holding tanks. But that was false. Was like 2 or 3 years prior. and they was in my tanks. And I spread one, all I spread. That was paid for the permit previous, not the year that I did. And that's all I got to say.
General Allen, you have the final say.
I want to draw your attention to the indictment. It's been read multiple times. Says the grand jurors of Stewart County, Tennessee, duly and Hamilton sworn upon their oaths do present that on or about January 19th, 2024, in Stewart County, Tennessee, prior to the signing of this indictment, that means before this indictment, Corbett Miller Jr. then and there did unlawfully engage in the business of removing waste from subsurface sewer disposal system, and dispose such wastes in any place and manner that do not meet the approval of the commissioner. It also means dumping. You gotta have, heard this work, you gotta have a permit to pump, you gotta have a permit. One of those things does not cover both of those. Right? That's where we're at.
Here you go, officer. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the defendant Corbett Miller Jr. is charged in the indictment with the crime of unlawfully disposing of subsurface sewage. The defendant pleads not guilty to the indictment and the offense contained therein. The evidence and arguments in this case have been completed, and it is my duty now to instruct you as to the law. The law applicable to this case is stated in these instructions, and it is your duty to carefully consider all of them. The order in which these instructions are given is no indication of their relative importance. You should not single out one or more of them to the exclusion of another or others, but should consider each one in the light of and in harmony with the other. The law presumes that the defendant is innocent of the charges against him. This presumption remains with the defendant throughout every stage of the trial, and it is not overcome unless from all of the evidence in the case, you are convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty. The state has the burden of proving the guilt of the defendant beyond a reasonable doubt, and this burden never shifts but remains on the state throughout the trial of the case. The defendant is not required to prove his innocence. Reasonable doubt is that doubt created by an investigation of all of the proof in the case and an inability after such investigation to let the mind rest easily as to the certainty of guilt. Absolute certainty of guilt is not demanded by the law to convict of any criminal charge, but moral certainty is required, and this certainty is required as to every element of proof necessary to constitute the offense. The state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt all of the elements of the crime charged, that the crime, if in fact committed, was committed by this defendant in Stewart County, Tennessee, and that it was committed before the finding and returning of the presentment in this case. The burden is upon the state to prove by a preponderance of the evidence that this offense was committed in Stewart County, Tennessee. Proof by a preponderance of the evidence means that the greater weight of the evidence must be in support of the state's contention. Venue of the offense lies in the county where the offense was commenced or consummated. If you find that the state has failed to prove by a preponderance of the evidence that this offense was commenced or consummated in Stewart County, Tennessee, then you must return a verdict of not guilty. As heretofore stated in the indictment, the defendant is charged with the crime of violating the Health, Safety, and Environmental Protection Statute for subsurface sewage disposal system. For you to find the defendant guilty of this offense, the state must have proven beyond a reasonable doubt the existence of the following essential elements. The defendant engaged in the business of removing waste from subsurface sewage disposal systems, and that the defendant disposed of such waste in any place and manner that did not meet the approval of the commissioner, and that the defendant acted either intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly. Intentionally means that a person acts intentionally with respect to the nature of the conduct or to a result of the conduct, when it is the person's conscious or objective or desire to engage in the conduct or cause the result. Knowingly means that a person acts knowingly with respect to the conduct or to circumstances surrounding the conduct when the person is aware of the nature of the conduct or that the circumstances exist. A person acts knowingly with respect to the result of the person's conduct when the person is aware that their conduct is reasonably certain to cause the result. Recklessly means that a person acts recklessly with respect to circumstances surrounding the conduct or to the result of the conduct when the person is aware of, but consciously disregards a substantial and unjustifiable risk that the circumstances exist or that the result will occur. The risk must be of such a nature and degree that its disregard constitutes a gross deviation from the standard of care that an ordinary person would exercise under all of the circumstances as viewed from the accused person's standpoint. If you find the defendant guilty of unlawful disposing of subsurface sewage as charged in the indictment, you shall so state. On the other hand, if you do not find the state has proven beyond a reasonable doubt the guilt of the defendant, or if you have a reasonable doubt as to his guilt, then you shall acquit the defendant of this offense. It is your duty as jurors to consult with one another and to deliberate with a view to reaching an agreement if you can do so without violence to individual judgment. Each of you must decide the case for yourself, but do so only after an impartial consideration of the evidence with your fellow jurors. During your deliberations, do not hesitate to re-examine your own views and change your opinion if convinced it is erroneous. But do not surrender your honest conviction as to the weight or effect of the evidence solely because of the opinion of your fellow jurors or for the mere purpose of returning a verdict. The verdict must represent the considered judgment of each juror. To return a verdict, it is necessary that each juror agree thereto. Your verdict must be unanimous. You can have no prejudice or sympathy or allow anything but the law and the evidence to have any influence upon your verdict. You must render your verdict with absolute fairness and impartiality as you think justice and truth dictate. When you retire to the jury room, you will first select one of your members as foreman or forelady who will preside over your deliberations. When you have reached a verdict, you will return with it to this courtroom and your foreman or forelady will announce it. In reaching your verdict, you shall consider the offense charged in the indictment. If you unanimously find the defendant guilty of the offense beyond a reasonable doubt, you shall return a verdict of guilty for that offense as to the defendant. On the other hand, if you find the state has not proven beyond a reasonable doubt the defendant's guilt, or if you have a reasonable doubt as to his guilt, then you must find him not guilty. In that event, your foreperson will report you find the defendant not guilty. If after your deliberations you find the defendant guilty, the court will set the punishment at a separate sentencing hearing. The jury will not be involved in setting the punishment. You may now retire to begin your deliberations. And ladies and gentlemen, I have prepared a verdict form, which is pretty simple. It just says that as to the charge, you find guilty or not guilty, and allows the foreman or forelady to sign off on that and date it. So we'll send that back with the original charge. Any of the exhibits that you want to watch, if you want to watch the video, you'll have to come back into the courtroom. The still photographs will be sent back with you for you to look at during your deliberations. All right. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You may retire and let us know if you're able to reach a verdict.
That hearing had a little bit of everything. After days of testimony and plenty of detours, the case against Corbett Miller Jr. wrapped up with closing arguments and jury instructions. The prosecutor kept things tight, focusing on the core issue. On January 19, 2024, Miller allegedly dumped sewage without a valid permit. The state emphasized that payment receipts and old paperwork don't equal a current license, and pointed to videos showing trails of waste or lime, as Miller insisted leaking from his truck. Miller, representing himself, countered with his closing statement, repeating that he hadn't pumped in 2023 or 2024, that anything spread came from holding tanks filled years earlier, and that what officials saw wasn't sewage at all. The judge then delivered a thorough set of jury instructions, reminding them of the presumption of innocence, the state's burden to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and the definitions of acting intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly. Jurors were told their verdict had to be unanimous, based only on law and evidence, and that punishment would be handled separately if they returned a guilty verdict. The atmosphere was calm but weighted the court, narrowing a long, complicated narrative into one straightforward question for the jury. Did Miller unlawfully dump sewage without approval on the date charged? If you found this hearing insightful, consider subscribing, hitting the bell, and letting me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every one.